Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 7-game Major League Baseball slate. It doesn't look like there's going to be too many weather issues today. The Atlanta game may have a little bit of rain beforehand. It'll probably be the coolest game on the slate, but overall, all the games should be clear weather. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, drop your home run comments below with who you think might hit home run today. And if you get it right, I'll call you out tomorrow. With that said, let's get into our core plays here. We have De La Cruz for Miami and Toscar Hernandez for Seattle. I honestly could have put 4 or 5 different guys in the outfield as core plays, but I do think those two guys are the best. And then for first base, there's two guys, Kirilloff and Ty France, that both jump off the page for me. So with that said, let's get into our pitchers here. We're going to start with Charlie Morton. Now, he's got a tough matchup against the Dodgers. He's somewhat of a boomer bust play today. He's not a must play, but he's cheap enough that he has some upside. I do think the Dodgers will score a couple of runs, but I think he has been pitching really well against good teams as well. He's had 2 earned runs against Boston and Texas the last 2 starts. If he can continue pitching like that, he's definitely a person that I would like to have in my lineup, assuming that he can do that. Then we'll look at Christian Javier, who's facing Milwaukee, who's also a decent team, but he's pitched pretty well lately. I really like his upside here. He's very capable, and he's had 3 straight quality starts against good teams. I like his upside, and he does feel a little bit risky, but he's only had a couple games under 20 fantasy points all season long, so he definitely has some good upside, though he is fairly expensive. Again, Corbin Burns is available here against Houston. Now, he has got 4 straight quality starts, and even though the matchup isn't ideal, Houston hasn't been quite as good as they normally are, and I think he is worth looking at, but I don't know that his price makes him like a must play or anything close to that. His upside is a little bit limited in the particular matchup. Then we'll look at Bailey Ober for Minnesota. Now, I do like some batters from San Francisco, but he's been over 15 fantasy points in every game this season. He's had 5 starts, and he's got decent upside here. He's got some good metrics for this matchup. Even if he gave up an earned run or 2, the strikeouts should be enough to offset 1 or 2, and he's got some upside as a good value play on the slate, and also my favorite under 8,500 player on this slate. And then we'll look at Luis Castillo for Seattle. Now, he's got a great matchup against Oakland. He hasn't been very good so far this season. He's been up and down. His price has come down some, which is going to help you roster him here. He's had a tough schedule for the most part, and so we can attribute some of that, and he's been good against the subpar teams, and this is definitely going to fall into that situation against a weak opponent like Oakland. So I do think the K rate has not been great this season so far, but he has upside as he's had some games with good K rates. So I do think he's up and down, but this matchup definitely gives him some upside based on that. So I think he's a good play on this one. If he was a little bit more consistent so far this season, he would have been a core play at this price point. Then we'll look at catchers. We're going to look at Elias Diaz for Colorado. He's really starting to hit the ball extremely well. He's also really good at home, like most players on Colorado. And this is a pretty good matchup against Cabrera for Miami. So I do think he's got some utility here. A little bit of a boomer bust play, and his price does not make him easy to roster. I wish he was still in the 4,000 range, but he definitely has upside in this matchup. An alternative to him is Sean Murphy for Atlanta. He's got some really good metrics. He's hitting the ball extremely well lately. He's got home runs potential here. He's the best catcher outside the Colorado games on the slate, metric-wise and just potential-wise, so I think he's very well in play. Then we'll look at Tom Murphy for Seattle. Now, he is somewhat high risk, high reward today. He's boomer bust like he is most games. If he draws a start, he'll be somebody to consider. At this minimum price, he helps you pay for other players that you want. At first base, we'll look at Freddie Freeman, who does have a tough matchup against Atlanta, but I do think he's probably one of the better options. He's played in Atlanta for a long time, and he's back in the Atlanta Stadium, so I think he's got some utility here. He does have potential, and the crowd will be in his favor as well, at least a little bit. And then Matt Olson is a good contrarian option off of him. He's also hit the ball really well this season, home run-wise at least, and he's been hitting extremely well lately. I think he's got some good upside, and this is a good matchup where I think a decently high-scoring game is potentially potentially possible here. But if I really, if I want to save money at this position, there's 2 guys to really do that with, and one of them is Alex Kirilloff, who's really hitting the ball extremely well lately. He's getting hits in quite a few games here. He's scoring fantasy points. Now, obviously, we want him to hit on run to really pay off here, but he's got the potential and the matchup is very good for him. Ty France is another guy I really like today. I really like a Seattle stack here in this one against Oakland. Uh, he hasn't been quite as good the last few games as he was the few games before it, but he's been pretty consistent this season. He has some home run potential. He hasn't hit the ball all that great. He's a 250 batting average, but he is a guy that can score some fantasy points, and he's definitely viable on the slate. Jared Walsh is a good Hail Mary option if he draws a start today. He started his first two games. He's got a hit in the second game. I do think he's got some potential here. He definitely has the power and metrics for it. It's just he's got to get going this season, but at any point he might start, and then when that happens, he'll be a really good value play at this price range. But we'll have to wait and see. Emmanuel Valdez for Boston is in play today. Assuming he draws a start, we'll have to wait and see because he got pulled in the last game. But we'll see if he starts. If he does, he's a top tier option at this position, as this is not much a lot of it. There's not a much. Excuse me. There's not much available at this position today. Xavier Edwards is also in play though at for Miami. He has not got really home run potential, but if he can get on base, he has stolen base potential. And this is the type of game where I definitely like a guy like him at a position this week because you can get some fancy points from that perspective. Harold Castro for Colorado is also in play for Colorado. Now, he's just very cheap, and he's somewhat of a Hail Mary play here, but he definitely has some upside in this matchup as he's been pretty good at home, actually having a 368 batting average. The only real concern here is that he doesn't have the biggest metrics for like home runs, but he has managed to score some fantasy points at home. Then we'll look at third base here. We're going to get into Rafael Devers for Boston. He's got a good matchup here against the Angels, and he's got great metrics and home run potential. His batting average is starting to come up a little bit, but he has been a little bit inconsistent this season, and so that is a concern. But he does have the potential to score 30 fantasy points like most people don't have. Then we'll look at McMahon for Colorado. Now, he has some good metrics for this one. His price is not ideal. He's been a lot better at home than on the road. As you can see, the batting average is almost 300 at home, but 176 on the road. As such, for a lot of Colorado players, he's got really good upside in this matchup. But it is somewhat high risk, high reward based on due to his price. Suarez for Seattle is a really good option today, I think, at this position. He's priced pretty fairly. The batting average obviously is not ideal, but he has the potential. He's got home run potential. He's got good metrics for this one, and he should be able to score some fancy points in this situation. Moving into the shortstop, this is another position that's pretty weak. Shortstop is pretty weak, but John Berti is in play here. He has not really hit home runs a lot yet this season, but he definitely has the potential to. And I do like his upside here, especially in Colorado, especially against relatively weak pitching. Then we'll look at Joey Wendell for Miami as well. Now, he has not hit the ball well this season, but if he does draw the start, he does have some utility, as when he does start, he tends to get some hits and stuff like that and score a couple of fantasy points. His price is cheap enough in this plus matchup as well. And then Carlos Correa is also in play for Minnesota here. At $4,300, he hasn't hit the ball very well this season, but he's starting to get some hits. 4 hits in the last 5 games, and he's gotten fantasy points in all these games, including 3 over 7 fantasy points. And at his price range, at a position that's relatively weak, he's definitely in play, despite the fact he hasn't played well. Moving into the outfield, the top tier option is Ronald Acuna Jr. for Atlanta. Now, he has just been one of the best players in baseball this season so far. I wouldn't be shocked to see his price hit $7,000 on DraftKings eventually if he continues on the massive run he's on. He's just managing to do all sorts of crazy stuff. So I like his upside in this matchup too, and he's definitely somebody I would consider in my lineup if I can afford it. Jorge Soler is also in play for Miami. He's hit the ball really well home run wise. He's got 12 already. The batting average isn't ideal, but he does have the capacity to have big games. He also had 4 hits yesterday, so I like his upside today in this matchup in Colorado especially. He should be able to have home run potential. Brian De La Cruz is also in play for Miami in Colorado. Now, this is a little bit risky, but he definitely has good potential here. And he's been hitting the ball pretty well, surprisingly for Miami. He's actually one of the guys who's been hitting the ball pretty well since he's been more consistent recently. And so he definitely draws some interest as a result of this home run potential here in this matchup. Yoshida for Boston has been kind of in a little bit of a funk, but he's been consistent throughout the season. Still getting lots of hits. He's just not had the fantasy upside that he had for a little while, but he's still playing good, and I like his metrics for this one, and he's got good potential. Then we'll look at Verdugo for Boston. He's got some nice upside here, though his price has come up a lot. He's still a viable option on the slate. He does have home run potential as well, though he hasn't been hitting them lately. He's got a great matchup. Then Toscar Hernandez, I really like his metrics today. He has home run potential written all over him. And it's been a few games since he's had one. I think it was in the middle of the month, so against Detroit. So he's got some really good metrics for this game. I like the upside, and his price is nice and cheap as well. Then when I mentioned at the beginning that I had a few different guys that are viable as core plays. Joey Gallo is one of them, though he is a boomer bust play because he's home run or bust most of the time. But he definitely has been hitting the ball hard, and he's got a great matchup to do it again. Another guy I like here is Profar from Colorado, who has really good upside in this matchup. He has home run potential. He has actually been about as even on fantasy points home or on the road. He's mostly just a pretty solid hitter when he's at home, and so I like his upside in this matchup. And then for last but not least, I'm going to look at Duran for Boston. Now, he's got good metrics for this matchup. He's hitting the ball pretty well this season. And if he draws a start today, which he's a little bit inconsistent drawing starts, he definitely has upside. He hasn't been hitting the last two games, but I do expect him to have a good game in this one against subpar pitching. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.